I couldn't find an antagonist in this whole thing. He's it. What do you think, Sterling? The bad guy? Is he
So
the bad
here,
guy?
Like if
here's
I'm
my
like if I have to pick that there is an antagonist,
Yeah.
Sterling, can you convince me otherwise?
okay. I'm sorry.
I guess you want me to cut that out. Okay. Hey guys, it's the Film Schmucks here. We got Trey, we got Sterling, we got me, Matt, and we're here with another review. This week, I had a pick. I'm gonna say beforehand before I get torn apart here, or praised. I don't know, but I've had this. I have a little list in my phone of movies that I want to watch. They're not always necessarily ones that I have picked for Film Schmucks. You said it was my pick this week. I'm like, I was at work or something. I'm like, let me check. And I had a few movies on there. I was gonna pick Whiplash because that's another movie about a drummer that's been on the list for a long time. We also watched No Way Home, which had J.K. Simmons. J.K. Simmons, arguably what people say best performances in this movie. So I'm like, let's check it out. But it's not streaming on anything, and I'm always the asshole in Film Schmucks who's like, let's watch this one, and you guys are like, I can only get it for 19.99 on eBay, you know. So I'm like, I went next on the list, Sound of Metal. All that to say that you know, that was my pick, and I just went straight to the list. I said I've been wanting to watch this one. Do you guys want me to kick it off?
Yeah, do it. Go for it.
I didn't. I knew what this movie was about vaguely. I knew it was about a musician who loses his hearing, like a drummer who loses his hearing. Didn't know much else outside of that. I had heard on a podcast. I had heard someone talking slightly about it and how they liked it a lot. So I was like, you know what? I'll let me take like a little bit of a shot in the dark. Like I don't. I knew the movie was like critically acclaimed and stuff as well, but I was also kind of weary because I don't know about you guys, but when I see like Netflix original or Prime original or things like that, to me that's almost like a marker of like this could be a bad movie because I feel like there's so much crap that gets put out by the streaming services. Anyway, I really enjoyed it. Me and Christy watched it last night. I was surprised. I knew it might be an emotional kind of film. And I was kind of surprised by some of the scenes of like how they were like I'll say this, like right off the movie kind of starts off pretty quickly. It's like the guy's losing his hearing within the first 5 minutes of the movie, and I was like anxious, like I had like an anxiety because of the way they do the sound and sort of the way he was acting when he was kind of like what's up, like messing with his ears and stuff. It almost like it gave me, and I know Christy felt the same way, some like a little bit of anxiety. And from that point on, that first like I'd say the first hour of the movie is really tense, or at least the first 40 minutes, something like that, before he gets to the deaf home or whatever. Um, and so I think the main actor, I'm forgetting his name at the moment. Is it
Riz Ahmed.
Riz? Yeah, Riz Ahmed. There's some things he was doing acting wise in this that really was really good. I have to say, like, there's a particular scene, and maybe we'll get into the specifics later, but like the scene when he's like officially going to try to do this sort of deaf camp or whatever it is, and the girlfriend's leaving. I felt so genuine the way he was acting and talking and crying that like it really got me because I don't know, it just felt real. Like the way, I don't even know how you can fake the way he was crying. If it's pure acting, it was really good. But either way, he
Yeah.
got himself to some place. But there's a couple of scenes in this movie like that got me where I was like, man, this, as far as act, like not just acting, but a story that I was really engaged and interested in. This was like, me and Christy both kind of said, I'm like, I think this might be one of the best movies I've seen in a little while, as far as and I also, there's a lot of like kind of meaning and thing, like a lot of meaning in the movie, and sort of full, like some of those, you know, it had a little bit to say as far as like life and things like that, and I really connected
Mhm.
with some of the messages of that, so I might be biased in that regard, but anyway, that's some general
Yeah.
thoughts.
Trey, do you want me to go?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, overall, really like this a lot. There's a couple things that we'll get into a little bit later that kind of kept me from loving this movie, but yeah, I think the performances for sure, especially Riz Ahmed was great. I mean, you mentioned it, Matt, that scene where she's leaving, like just it was so devastating and just heartbreaking, and it really made you feel for him, and it made him much more of a sympathetic character. Um, yeah, the sound design, I believe the sound design won the Oscar, if I'm not mistaken,
I was wondering
which
about that.
makes sense. It's very unique. It's not, obviously, it's not like the best like music or best like quality sound, but the way they use the sound is what makes it unique. And I really appreciated that. Especially when, initially when his hearing goes away, that was terrifying. That really kind of scared me. Also, when he gets his hearing back through that device, that may have been even more terrifying because of how bad it was, just the quality and like, obviously that was devastating his reaction to the sound because you can't ever go back to his life. Um and so yeah, overall really liked it, and it I was interested to see that you picked this, Matt, because you know you usually don't pick like Oscar type movies like this, but I was pleasantly surprised to see you choose this.
By the way, I'm not
If
laughing at
that
you. I'm laughing at Trey because you look like he was about to fall asleep. Woo, Trey.
what
Trey, just
was I that boring?
no.
No, the movie was.
Here we go.
Yeah, I mean, the first 15, 20 minutes, I mean, I like Matt said, it was kind of interesting. They went with the let's just go right into it. He's losing his hearing. Um, but I like how they went from like, like when he breaks down and leaves the concert
Mhm.
and he can officially
Yeah,
not hear.
yeah.
I like that. I like that, like it went from hearing stuff, but later on in the movie they did it again when he was having a conversation with Joe, the head guy at the deaf camp, and they did it again. And I'm like, I just didn't like that. I'm like, okay, we get it. He can't hear. You already established it earlier because Joe talks for some reason. I mean, at that scene, he already knew sign language, so it was kind of weird. But and it's weird how I mean, maybe yeah, he lost his hearing in the Vietnam War. So anyway, my point is that it was just kind of he was talking, you hear birds chirping, and then it went silent, and I'm like, it just took me out. I was engaged, and it was just I was one little nitpick for me. I'll
Hmm.
get one of my nitpicks out of the way. But the first 15 minutes, here's my overall. I mean, not really overall, but like, it just felt really artsy fartsy. I
Woo.
I sat there thinking before they got into the emotional stuff later. I was like, what is this movie? Who is this movie for? Like, who invested in this? Because I'm like, this is, I just didn't make sense why it was made. And eventually, there is some, I guess you could argue, reasons for deaf people. And I'm just like that Peanut Butter Falcon movie that was for a certain crowd, um, certain thing. But it's just that first half, it really just felt like it was a non movie. Like I'm like this is a waste. And it was just really they went too artsy. But like I said, the second half it really kind of he was fighting his battles, and she left him, and or not left him, but he had to go to the camp and establish relationships, make
Hmm.
sacrifices, all that stuff. But real quick, until we'll go into specifics. But one for me, a specific scene. You were saying how there was a scene where I think I forgot what scene you were talking about earlier. The scene that where I kind of connected with it, not that like I connect with deaf people, but when he starts breaking stuff. Oh, you were talking about the
Yeah.
scene when she leaves. My scene, I've been in that situation where specifics for me. I came home one day, I bumped into this fan, and it kind of fell over, and I just picked I for 5-10 minutes. I just broke
Hmm.
it to smithereens, just beating it, beating it, beating it. And there's no reason for it. It was just really
The build
emotional,
up.
built up. Yeah, it was a long time ago in my life, but just so much emotion. So I've really felt that in that scene where he just was uncontrollable. So I
Yeah.
really felt that.
Yeah, I get that. I think that was probably some of the strong suit of the movie was a lot of things like that that just felt more real. That like it felt like so relatable. Like, oh, this is how a human might act in this situation, or even not in that situation. Like you said, it's like there's something about that, and I think it's because he was kind of playing it cool up until that point. He was like at least trying to, and that was when you could tell like now the kind of the realization sets in of what's happening and all the build up, and then he's just doing it.
The build up,
Yeah.
it's also it's not only the build up, but the fact that he's not hearing anything even while he's destroying shit. I feel
Yeah.
like that adds to the frustration of it.
Yeah, I didn't quite even think about it. There's a lot of little moments where it's like you're kind of almost forgetting, like like the first conversation he has with Joe when Joe has the dog, and he's talking to Lou, and he's like, "So we'll go ahead and have a talk if you stay here and watch the dog." And then after this whole conversation about it, they start walking, and Ruben, the main guy's just like, "Are you coming?" Like you can tell he just didn't really get the gist of the conversation from hearing it. And there's like little moments like that where it's like, and especially earlier on when he's talking to the girl, and he's like, "You have to write it down." And probably one of the strongest, like probably one of the strongest, once again because it felt so real and so genuine, was when he's kind of more and more frustrated with the fact that it's like, "Hey, I can't hear you," you know? And then he's like, "I'm fucking deaf. I can't fucking hear what you're saying." Like it that was just I think those parts of his performance were like, I don't know. The actor, like just the way he was channeling some emotion, it was like it felt so authentic, which is why it set it apart for me. Like there's good performances in movies where I'm like, oh, that's like a powerful line, or that's a powerful. The words are powerful, or like, man, this person can make themselves cry or something. It was like the frustration that he was conveying was like I hadn't really seen that a lot in movies, like in such a real way. So yeah,
Hmm.
that was those are some of the really strong moments. And I do have something kind of a nitpick of mine, maybe not a nitpick, but something to say is that like um, those first parts of the movie where there's so many strong emotions, like it is devastating. Christy even said, because Christy had no idea what we were watching, and she was like, I think like 10-15 minutes of the movie, she's like, why did you pick such a sad fucking movie? Because it's just really sad. The first like half hour is really sad, and it's just like you're just like it's like you said, it's devastating, and then and terrifying. But the only thing I would say about that is the emotions for me sort of peak around those times, to where the rest of the movie to me, there are a couple of good scenes later, like when he comes back and talks to Joe and Joe tells him he can't stay there, is like a really powerful scene. But I did feel like after that my emotions never quite, it wasn't much of a roller coaster ride of a movie. It was a little bit more of like really intense, really intense, really intense. Okay, it's mellow now, and we're kind of figuring out what this guy's gonna do. And there's
Hmm.
a little bumps after that, and a little bit like, oh, what's he gonna do with the girl? But for me, that was one thing where I was like, man, you rocked me to the core so quick and so fast in the first 20 minutes of the movie. Someone's going to take this out of context and make it sound like I'm talking about sex. But then the end of the movie, there was just like it did kind of, I don't know, it never quite got there, which in some ways part of the messaging, I mean, the way the movie ends even is sort of just like you have to kind of like, it kind of was more about being like still and mellow and all of that. But
Yeah, content for sure.
yeah,
Um, well, I will say near the end, so I have a positive and a negative. The positive is at the end whenever he has the last conversation with Lou. I think that is some really good emotion, and you can kind of tell that they obviously love each other, but they know that they can't be together, even though they basically say like, "Hey, you saved my life, you saved my life."
yeah,
Like, and so there is like a sadness to that for sure. Now, I wish there could have been a little bit more development with not just his relationship, but also the backstory with Lou's father and like what
Yeah.
happened there. Because a lot of that was just explained through dialogue. It wasn't really explained through any kind of flashbacks
Yeah.
or anything like that. So it didn't really feel as fleshed out as I may have liked it to be. So that'd be like my one criticism is that I think the movie could have gone further in
Hmm.
some of the storylines. Could have fleshed it out just a little bit more.
Yeah, I like 100% agree with that because I mean, me and Christy both talked about that scene where it was so subtle, where he kind of realized that he kind of knew. He's like, we can get back into it. We can start doing it again. We can do all this. And you could, she didn't even say, but he could just kind of tell because he knew her well enough. Oh, she's kind of moving on. Like she's kind of in this different place, and I'm kind of in a different place, even though I don't want to accept it, kind of. And then it's like, and I was like, that was like a unique. I don't know. It felt like a much more real way that something like that could happen. Um, yeah, but I do agree with you. Like the dad kind of talks to him when he first shows up, and like you kind of learn a little bit. Oh, okay, but like maybe a little more development would have been more understandable why she's moved on and stuff, other than just one little party scene. So
Yeah.
I kind of I agree with that.
Hmm. Trey?
Well, I mean, I'm still kind of confused. Like, because they're, is there a time frame of how long they were apart?
That's actually one thing in the movie is it's hard to tell how long. I don't know how many. I'm assuming it's been months, but or like, but I don't know. Me and Christy were wondering that too, and Christy picked out a really good nitpick.
What's that?
Well, there's a couple of clues. I don't know if they ever say directly, but it seems like it's been by the time he's selling the RV, it seems like it has to have been at least a month.
But I
But
was
there
thinking, I felt like it was like months.
I
That's
thought
just
so
me.
too. I thought so too. I'm just saying like let's say, if we have to say like cuz they don't give us enough in thing, let's just say it's at least a month, but it feels like it should be way more cuz he learned sign language basically. I'm like I don't know how
Yeah.
long that takes, but I guess if you're doing it every day maybe you can learn it faster. But Christy, and this is maybe the whole thing with her being a cosmetologist and all that, but she was like his hair would have been way longer. Like his hair never grew. Like, and it was the same style where it was sort of short and long on the sides, and it was bleached. And so we were like, I was like trying to like give explanations because I was like, well, maybe look, maybe the dude keeps up with that punk rock hairstyle. Maybe he's bleaching his hair and cutting it to the perfect length. But it's like we're sitting there. But I was like, that's a good nitpick because I'm like it seems like it has to have been a couple months, and
Yeah.
his hair would have been way longer even after a few weeks. So, but he
Yeah.
had the exact same hairstyle the whole movie until he shaved it, and it's like, but that
Yeah.
didn't show any indication that he would have the capability to get that cut his hair the right way and bleach it.
Mhm.
So anyway,
Well,
but that speaks to the point that they weren't very clear on how long it had been.
my question would be is, well, if it, because like you were saying, it doesn't. I don't think it's years. I don't think we think
No.
it's years. What's the point? Why would they break up? Even though she's doing her own thing now, he really can't do his own thing or go back to what he was doing. What's the reason for the separation?
We well, me and Christy were talking about that. The reason seems to be, and this is kind of to that thing where maybe if there's a little more development here, but the dad is talking to him when he first shows up, and he sort of says like,
I want to thank you.
she was with her mom, and then her mom died, and then when she was older and she didn't want to come with me or whatever, I'd have to watch it again, kind of. But like he basically says like, well then you were there, like you were there, and at the time I really didn't like you, and now I do. But it's like, it seems like because of the fact that she needed someplace to go and that he was there, that she ended up reconnecting with the father, and now she's reconnecting with this other part of her life, and that was part of where she was just in a different. But I kind of got the vibe that she was almost in a little bit of a phase with him, like as far as like I'm doing this death metal thing, and that she kind of
Mhm.
reconnected with her father. She reconnected with the French, this other side of her, and she talks a little about. She's like, oh, I thought I forgot all the French, but some of it's coming back. It almost seemed like part of it was her like maybe growing up a little bit. But
Well,
it's pretty vague. Like it is
oh
vague.
yeah,
I gotta say.
just like Sterling was saying, that's not how. normal breakups work, especially in these that type of emotional situation. Like one conversation, I love you, you saved me, I saved you. See ya. No, that oh come on.
Yeah,
Anyway,
I will say though, one thing I
I
really
just didn't know if I missed anything. I mean, like dialogue, like the father scene. I'm like, I didn't think that really
yeah, yeah.
would have made
Well,
them break up.
I think the reasons are reason enough, but I agree that they could have fleshed those reasons out more. So
Yeah.
they maybe they could have.
Yeah.
Although I think the movie's about Ruben, not about Lou. So that's the only thing is if the movie's
Yeah.
so much about him, it's so hyper focused on him, which maybe is to a fault. But
But,
if it's like if you gave too much, it's hard to like you said, if you did flashbacks, I don't know if that would fit the tone of the movie. And then it's like, are we doing flashbacks with Lou? Because this movie's not about Lou; it's about Ruben. So then
well,
Yeah.
it gets difficult.
well, they skip around a lot in this movie, so they could have just he came and saw her for the first time in months or whatever it is, and they skip ahead a couple months.
Yeah.
They could have done that. I'm like, that's an extra two scenes, whatever. That would have been fleshed
Well,
out. But this is like one night.
I think part of it overall was that they were trying to show, maybe make the point that with Ruben is like Ruben's there and he's sort of like he's talking about how it's not about fixing he says like it's not about fixing your hearing. That's not something that's to be fixed. It's like fixing like he's an addict. All these people are addicts, and like it's about living life and being content and stuff. And I think part of that, I don't know if it was executed super well, like you're saying, but like I think that part of the idea of where is I think Ruben thought I'll just fix my hearing and then everything's going to go back and it's going to be great. And it's like
Hmm.
that's just not how it works. Like you're not just going to be like all of a sudden everything's going to go back because things change and people change and all that. But
And that's what he realized, but he also realized that he had a great community back at the deaf camp.
yeah.
Like he was building what Trey?
I, I heard
Deaf
Death
camp.
Camp.
Yeah. No,
Sorry.
at the deaf compound. No, he had built some really great relationships out there, and he was becoming like a very necessary part of that community. Um, so I think that's a little bit of subtext and a little bit of what he was probably thinking whenever, and ultimately they decided to part ways, him and Wu. So
That does anybody have anything they were wanting to talk about?
Yeah. Well, I
You
was
do?
gonna say something sort of, but if you wanna, if you're on the same lines,
No, I got something else.
okay.
You go ahead.
I was gonna say because it sort of relates to a little bit. One thing I really liked that they did in this movie, and I wonder if you guys agree or disagree. I and Christy said the same thing. I was starting to get my first initial thought was that Lou was with another guy. He was gonna show up and she was gonna be with some other dude, which would have been so annoying because besides it being a cliche, right?
Yep.
But the other hat thing that I thought was they were they were giving a lot of attention to that teacher, the children's teacher,
Mhm.
and I was like gonna be really annoyed if they did a thing where he hooks up with her or something. And I was so relieved and glad that the movie did not go that route where it was like, oh, he cheats on her with this teacher. I'm like, I don't, because I'm like, I'm like, and I was glad they didn't because then it's like, oh, we can focus on the stuff that I am interested in this movie. That was one thing
yeah.
that I was like, oh, I was like almost surprised they didn't try to go there either way with Lou hooking up with someone or he does it. I thought that it was great that it was more like they just they were just people changing, you know?
Oh yeah. I think I think that's one thing that was really good about this was it was focused. It wasn't all over the place. You had one main character to follow basically and a couple other smaller plot lines, but in the end, even though there could have been maybe a little bit more, you can't say that it wasn't like well directed or well focused. Like it knew what it wanted to do and it saw throughout the whole film as far as its vision.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Trey, what was it you wanted to get to?
Well,
Oh,
I
did I hear a heel turning? No,
He's
he
already
he
turned
already
heel.
did turn now. Sorry, go ahead. I just wanted
I
to
love
say
your
that
spy.
line. I'm sorry.
I love your Spidey senses though, because you were right on. Uh I want to go back to when they first meet Joe.
Here we go. I like to call him Joe Ponytail.
Yeah, thank you. Uh Now, so Joe seems like a nice guy. He's got a little midget dog, whatever, little rodent, not even a dog, a
Yeah,
rodent.
can't
Cool.
I can't argue with that.
So he hands the dog off. They go talk, bring in Lou, and then he's like, yeah, obviously paraphrasing. She's gotta go. You gotta give me your cell phone, and you can't live in your van. And like he's like, no, that doesn't work for me, whatever. As the scene lays out, and he's like, that's the way it is, and that's how we see it that it works. It's like, well, maybe this guy's different. But anyway, that's not the major issue with Joe. All right. Now let's get to the scene where he comes back from his surgery. He sits down with Joe, and I'm like, why would you even tell him? I thought when he was coming back, he had all hooded up. I'm like, okay, he's gonna hide it till whatever. But then he sits down and tattletales on himself. I'm like, whatever. Kind of weird. So he sits down. Wait, sorry. He sits down, tells him, and he's like, hey, it was weird. He asked him for money. That was really
Yeah.
kind of awkward. But then he's like, hey, can I stay here for a couple weeks? And I'm like, I never really got the sense that he couldn't. And then Joe goes on this diatribe, God ponytail, diatribe about how, these people, they don't think you can fix this. We're all high mighty deaf people. We don't care about hearing people, you know? And he says, no, you can't. He can't even spend the next. He can't even have one more night. He kicks him to the curb. Now, my question to Matt would be, now they haven't seen the review. I haven't seen this yet, but I'm wondering if you, in preparation of this episode, that they would agree with me, Christy and Ezra, that Joe Ponytail himself was the bad guy in this movie.
Oh my. That was all leading up to that. You think Joe was a bad? Well,
I couldn't find an antagonist in this whole thing. He's it. What do you think, Sterling? The
hmm.
bad guy? Is he
So
the bad guy?
here,
Like if
here's
I'm
my
like if I have to pick that there is an antagonist,
Yeah.
Sterling, can you convince me otherwise?
well.
I mean,
As
I'm on
far
the
as
fence here. I
okay,
want to hear the.
so here's my opinion on that whole thing. Okay, so I think Joe is a great example of someone who holds to his principles, but I think his principle in this case was it led him to the wrong conclusion because I think the right thing to do would be to help. Um, you know, I think it would be to help the
Oh
guy
my
out.
gosh.
I really do think it would be the right thing, especially after what he's done for his community and all that. I understand where he's coming from, where Joe's coming from, because he explains it well. I don't think it's bad writing. I think his character is written
Yeah.
pretty well,
Yeah.
and they set up his character being very principled and very like you got to follow these rules and you cannot stray from them. So it's not bad writing. It is, but I don't agree with the character's choice ultimately.
I can't believe that you sided with Trey on this. I'll see if Ezra agrees that Joe is the bad guy. But
He's not a bad guy though. That's
no.
he
uh?
Is he a bad guy or not?
No,
Say yes or
no.
no.
But it's
he did the
interesting.
wrong
It's
thing.
interesting because it seems like you guys both agree with that. I disagree. Well, first of all, I do agree that he is written well and that it's not, whether you agree with him or not, it does feel believable that his character would have that thing. But the
Yeah.
reason I disagree is the man laid it out himself why it wasn't good for him to be there. He looks and sounds like an addict, and this guy, he's not just he's not just Def Champ 2000. All right, he's also basically a sponsor for an AA group. Essentially, I mean, he's helping addicts, and so he has to. He knows what's good and bad, like what you can and can't do, And as far as I understand, it's like I don't know. Maybe we don't know enough. And it clearly
You're,
wasn't
you're,
easy for Joe, but I feel like his explanation made sense to me, which is he's like, "Look, this is a bad message to these other people here." Um sorry,
well,
go ahead.
what Winkler, whatever his name in Waterboy, the coach says, "What Mama don't know, don't hurt her."
you're
Oh, that
saying
sounds
if
great.
he just sleeps there and leaves kind of thing.
They don't need to know. Yeah, just like
Where's he
Sterling
going to
was saying,
stay that
like
they don't know? He's there.
he can keep this. I thought that he was just gonna keep his beanie
Oh,
on
I
for
see
like,
what you're saying.
and
Just don't tell anyone you can hear.
yeah, do his
I
sign language.
actually, I'll be honest, I did think that for a second. I was like, could you just leave the beanie on and or take them off while you're here? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
What's going to
yeah.
be the difference? But I see where Joe Blow Ponytail was coming from here. Uh,
I just think you're reaching. Just now that Sterling agreed, you had to. Anyway, I'm just joking. No, but you're right. Joe Ponytail had his principles, or like Sterling said. I mean, it's just weird. I just took kind of a
yeah,
weird.
I
Oh,
see what you mean.
my to counter you because you were specifically talking about, like, he says he's an addict or you're acting like an addict. I'm like, did he do drugs? I mean, he
Yeah.
wanted his hearing.
Yeah.
He knew he wanted to get his hearing back the whole time. He told him about the surgery. It's not like he just didn't say anything and then went and did it and came
Oh,
back.
I see what you're saying. In that moment, did he do drugs?
Yeah,
Like, it's not like he
even
actually
though he asked
Yeah.
for
did
the
do
money.
drugs.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, he did. He asked for money, which was kind of weird. But then he's like, "Hey, can I just stay here and do my thing and help out for like a
and
couple
that's
weeks?"
maybe where the real fault could have been there with Joe was that he saw he that was that it not that was basically like if he was suspecting that the guy was doing drugs, then I think he's 100% in the right. You can't have an addict staying there who's doing drugs.
Yeah,
So maybe that's where his main fault was. He actually thought in that moment that the guy really, that it wasn't just I need money for the RV and stuff. He might have thought the guy actually was on drugs. And
yeah,
if he did think that, then it makes 100% sense why he was doing
yeah,
that. So that might
yeah.
be an example.
Well, color me surprised that Sterling leaned towards my way, even though that
Yeah,
whole thing,
that
even
shocked
though like
me.
that whole thing was because of last week or Spider-Man one.
Yeah, yeah, I
All
know. It
because
was
it
a
was
great
Spider-Man.
build up just for that joke too. I have to say,
He's a bad
Sterling
guy.
agreeing with Trey in that moment. I mean that because I was kind of playing. I was joking around like, yeah, Joe's the bad guy. Let's see what you have to say, Sterling. We'll hear an argument. He's like, I gotta say, the Joe's an asshole. Let's be honest. But
Wait.
no, I know you didn't say that. I know you didn't say that. I have a
He meant
call.
it.
I do have a phone in. Someone sent a fan sent an email. A fan by the name of Christy, friend of the show, sent in. She said the main character is his own antagonist. That's the antagonist, the true antagonist of the movie.
Oh, he's battling himself.
Yeah,
Okay.
That's true.
which checks out.
Yep.
I'd
Christy's
say
right
she's
again.
correct.
I,
Anyway,
I like I like my little evil
Pony.
plan myself. I like Ponytail,
Yeah,
even
yeah.
though it was a joke.
I mean that actor was really good though.
I was
That played
surprised by
Joe.
him. Yeah, actually, that once again another like I said earlier, it's like that moment when just the look on the guy's face. He felt like a real person. Like he felt like I just believed that this guy was a real guy working at a real place, and like
Hmm.
I'm sure there's places like that exist, but like there, and I that leads me into say, well, first of all, the acting in that scene's great, but that leads me into saying something that I thought was interesting about this movie. There was a lot of times in the movie, the cinematography and stuff was really good, but the way the characters were acting in a lot of moments, I almost felt like I could have been watching a documentary.
Yeah.
Which I don't, that's something people say about a movie. Like it's so good, I felt like but genuinely,
Well,
something about the cinematography combined with the acting was so good and so genuine. Other than those one-on-one scenes, there was a lot of it
mhm.
where I'm like, this seems like something you really could watch a documentary about a deaf place based around this guy.
Which I'm just kind of curious, Trey. You said that you thought this movie was too artsy. In what way did you think it was artsy? Because in my opinion, like the cinematography for what they were going for worked for it. and it was done very well, but nothing about the visuals was like artsy to me. Are you talking more
Trey
about the
Trey did
acting
say
or the
the first.
pacing?
Didn't you say the first 15 minutes you thought was too artsy?
Yeah, like almost the first half, but yeah, mainly the first 20, 15 to 30 minutes. But just the
Okay.
cinematography and the slow pace, the
Hmm.
dragged out scenes, and they're just trying to do more than what they just didn't have enough writing, enough of a film. They just tried to make it all look cool.
Hmm.
I didn't buy it personally.
Okay. I mean, I didn't get that sense, but that's fair.
Oh, thank you, Sterling. Agree to disagree.
He's back, baby. Uh,
He's back.
Christy had a nitpick.
Been here the entire time.
Christy had a nitpick. So remember, I told you she didn't really know anything about the movie, and I from the very first scene in the movie, which I liked, but the very first scene when he's just playing the drums really intense, and the girl is singing, and they're like in that weird band or whatever. Christy was like said something like, "Can this girl shut up?" or something like you could tell she was annoyed. And then at the end of the movie, she even said she's like, "I loved it, thought it was great, one of the better movies we've seen in a while." But my big nitpick that scene, that girl singing at the beginning went way too long. And I
Uh,
actually liked the whole sound and stuff of the scene, but I agree a little bit because her doing that was kind of annoying, and then it like went on a little long.
but it made it feel authentic because
Yeah,
I've been to a metal concert before,
yeah,
and
it's
that it
annoying.
just
Yeah.
if it is annoying, it felt very accurate. So good
I
on
wished
them.
I kind of want to watch this movie. I wish I saw this movie in theaters. I actually wanted to watch it in theaters, but nothing ever fucking plays at the AMC in Wichita. It's annoying because they got to sell tickets right now, so they'll play Spider Man on every fucking theater, and I got to go down to the one if I
Uh,
want to watch Licorice Pussy Pizza. Sorry, my
I
bad.
want to see
pizza.
that though.
Yeah, I did too. Um, sorry.
Well, even the ending was kind of just like just so flamboyantly like here's the message.
Yeah,
Hey,
yeah.
here's the hammer on your head. Like
It was a little on the nose, but I will
yeah.
say that part of because I liked it so much, I that's where the bias maybe comes in. But I was like, oh, like I really relate to this. I like this concept a lot. Um, and part of what I
Thought it was a
liked,
nice bow.
yeah, and I think partly because the whole movie, the guy never quite figures out the stillness part that the guy was talking about, that Joe was talking about.
Well, that's the ending.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's the ending. But I see what you mean. It's a little like obvious, you know.
Well, that's a good point. Yeah, that he figured it out at the end, at like last second.
I mean, for me, I think it was about as good of an ending as you could have for this movie because I really liked the fact that it's just him sitting at a bench and you just hear all this noise and it's really overpowering. And intentionally, I think that they did it that way because it is like it gets to you. And for me, like I was like, can we just like shut the sound off? And
Yeah.
so whenever that transition happens, I kind of felt that same sense of peace that he was feeling in that moment. So I feel like the ending was effective in that way.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. He yeah, and that's what it's like, man, the whole concept of that with the guy. I mean, I think that was the why Joe I like Joe so much as this character. Him talking about that you can write in this room and you can write until you can't write and then you can just sit. And then later him kind of saying like it's not about the writing, it's like those little moments that I have where everything's completely still and it's like he's like to me that's the kingdom of God kind of thing was like really great line, really interesting.
Yeah. It was also interesting seeing the different like devices. The fact that Joe, could talk into the microphone and, it was speech to text software that
Yeah.
he was using to communicate with um I keep forgetting the main character's name.
Ruben.
What's his name? Ruben, that's right. But also whenever Ruben calls the doctor's office,
Mm-hmm.
and the
Mm.
phone, it can, read text. They can, put text in there whenever they're talking. And I
Yeah.
thought that was just really cool. I assume those are actual like real
Yeah, it
machines,
must
so
be.
it was kind of educational in a lot of ways too. This movie.
Yeah, well, and I was gonna say, like, that's actually something that I thought, you were talking about earlier about that, like, how terrifying it was when he was losing his hearing. I think, I've gone around. I like you think about that every once in a while in your life, like, what would it be like to be blind, or what would it be like to be deaf, or how bad would that be? I always only think about, well, like, if your whole life was this way, that would stink, right? Kind of thing. It's like I'm rarely actually thinking like about the traumatic, like the trauma of having hearing and losing the hearing. Must it's
Yeah.
like I never really I'm not thinking about that part of it as much. I'm just thinking about the part when you're deaf more, and it's like, what about that part? And that's why I think it was so anxiety inducing.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of like great things where like little like you said educational things. I thought the people at the camp felt like very real genuine people. I'm assuming, I mean, obviously they're real. I don't know if they were real deaf, but they all spoke sign language, or
Hmm.
could do
Well,
sign language.
yeah, that teacher, that the kid teacher, she was from Eternals and she was deaf in Eternals, so I
Oh,
assume
okay.
she was deaf in real life.
Interesting.
So yeah,
Yeah,
but
she yeah, that
no, I thought the same thing you thought, Matt. I thought they were gonna bang.
yeah, I was worried about that.
Hey, I feel bad for the guy. He
You're
ended up
like
with he ended up with nobody. I thought he was gonna end up with that fat deaf girl. Jeez, got
she was a
it.
lesbian, obviously. Anyway,
Hey, even
You like the little
that don't
bush?
matter if you're drunk.
that was a funny scene, by the way. Was because at first I'm like, once I realized he could do tattoos, it made more sense. But at first I'm like, what am I watching? Like when they're sitting on the bed and he's like, yeah,
Mhm.
little shaved, okay, yeah, little bush, sure, and then she's like, not too much. Do you know what I'm talking about, Trey? The scene
Oh
where
yeah,
he's
yeah.
drawing the naked girl.
Yeah,
I'm
that's
like, are
yeah.
these pervs have been to this death thing too long, you know? But they're perving over a naked girl. He's drawing pictures for the people at the camp. What the hell? And then when I realized it was a tattoo, I'm like, oh, that makes more sense later when it shows her with the tat.
Yep.
But yeah, that was that was one thing that kind of blew my mind a little bit, was when all of them were around the table. Which, by the way, first, that's another sad thing, is when he first gets there and he doesn't know how to speak sign language, and
Oh,
all the people are communicating and stuff, and you can tell he's just sitting there like so
so
uncomfortable
awkward.
and awkward, and what do I do? But when he gets into it at the table and everyone's talking to each other with the sign language, I'm like, I was like, I've never seen that many people communicating with sign language. I'm like, I guess as long as you can see, you can hear. But then again, maybe they're having one-on-one conversations and it just looks. But it's funny that it's like a visual way of, like, it looks rambunctious, like it would be if you had a group of people like sitting around a
Yeah.
dinner table. It was interesting seeing it in a way where it was like, but it was all just, and when it had those moments where you're just hearing like these slight noises because they're not talking, but it also just looks so lively at the same time, even though you're just hearing like, a
Yeah.
couple pats here and there and a plate being moved.
Yeah, I thought it
And I
was
think
the scene that he was having that competition with that kid doing the alphabet. That was cool.
Oh yeah, that was good. That was good. Once
That's
again,
like
that
that's
seemed real. That seemed like I was watching a documentary like about this place.
also when I mean, he initially has a hard time adjusting, but then kind of the thing that makes it to where he feels more comfortable is when he shares that moment with that kid at the slide and they start like hitting the slide and they feel the vibrations
Yeah,
and they do the drum beats and obviously he uses his talent to kind of like connect with that kid and I thought that was just a
yeah.
great kind of small moment and then it just kind of it all goes uphill from there, it makes his life that much easier.
Yeah, that I like that scene too, because I feel like that was the play on words in the title. Is like obviously like the sound of metal. He's in a metal band, and then the sound of metal is like you're like, oh, and if you've been on a slide like that or something like that, like it's like it's not necessarily really loud, but it's very like the vibration and stuff makes it powerful. And they even have kind of a shot where it's way further away, and you can
Hmm.
kind of maybe barely hear a little bit of a tapping. But then when it's kind of showing from their perspective and it's all vibrations and the kid's kind of laying his head on the slide and I don't know, it was really cool.
Yeah.
That was a good scene.
I
Well,
definitely think. Oh, go ahead, Trey.
no, I was gonna just do my closing. That's all. Go ahead.
Um, no, actually, I'll wait for closing thoughts too.
Okay,
So yeah,
let's
yeah,
go.
I mean, if anybody else has anything else, I don't want to close this down too soon.
No, I think that's no.
All
I
right.
think we can
Well,
close it up.
like I was saying, every once in a while, there's a film that initially maybe I would be interested in. I had no idea what this was about until you mentioned it, and we looked it up. Obviously, it's on Amazon Prime, and you watch it. Um, I would have thought like for a comparison, Parasite, I thought I was gonna hate it. I took Sterling's word one of the very few times he was right. And I love that movie. This one I didn't know anything about it. Just wasn't for me. I get the message. Like I said, it took it too long, in my opinion, to get to the message. I guess there's maybe you could argue what the message was because it's all centered around the same thing. About deaf awareness, and there's a lot of cool things that it taught the public that probably didn't know anything about the deaf community. Um, but yeah, just overall, just as a film, overall, I just didn't enjoy it. I think there was to me, way too many weaknesses, and I just didn't overall enjoy it. But like I said, I do like the message, and I think the first half of the last act I really enjoyed. Um, that was really really strong. But like I said, just not for me. But cool, a good message. Good to have one of these films like Peanut Butter Falcon. Good to have those kind of films that doesn't touch on the subject, a subject that might be sensitive to people. It's cool to have those movies out there.
Um, Trey, or do you want to go second or last, Sterling? Because you're pretty good at buttoning up stuff.
yeah. Go ahead, Matt.
Okay. Uh, yeah, I like I said. I mean, I was kind of in the same boat as Trey in a way, which is that I this was a shot in the dark movie. I didn't know if I was gonna like it or hate it. I believe I watched the trailer a long time ago, and that was why I had written it down because I was like, oh, that looks seems kind of interesting, but I didn't know what I was gonna get, and it was in and that's the whole thing about sometimes you get a grab bag like that where you're like, hey, here's a movie I don't know much about. You might hate it, you might love it, and I this one I really liked a lot, and I think I it spoke to me a lot. I really liked the I liked the yeah I liked a lot of the themes. I liked the struggle of Ruben, and I thought it was. I mean, we talk about good acting in these movies. There's acting that we see in like The Master, which is a certain kind of acting where it's great performance, but it feels like a performance still in the sense that it's I don't know. It doesn't always feel. Sometimes some of these movies, there's me and Christy talk about this all the time. What is good acting? Is good acting you believe it, or is good acting a great performance, as in it's theatrical in the right way? This was the movie where it was completely believable. Where if you recorded this on a cell phone, the scene where the girl's leaving, and told me it was a legit situation, I might believe it. Like I thought that the acting was so good on some of those scenes. Um, and so that was interesting to me just on that level. And I think, yeah, I think all the dots just kind of connected for me. It was like I was interested in the themes of the movie. I liked the acting. I liked I talk about sound design on a lot of episodes. And so, like you said, they used the sound in a very unique way. I mean, I don't even know how they did exactly the part at the end when he has the transplants. And it's like almost like chip, kind of like it sounds really weird. And it was jarring, and the way I mean, that's pretty good. It was jarring in a way where it was effective. So there was just a lot of strengths there. It was a good movie. I might go back and watch it sometime. It's not like a watch it all the time kind of movie, but it's one where like in a few years I'll probably go back and watch it again. So
Yeah. Definitely like this movie. A couple things that I wish were more fleshed out in terms of the relationship of the father with Lou and with Ruben. And I think if there was a little bit more to that, maybe there would have been a little bit more of a punch by the end whenever Ruben and Lou break up. But overall, um, I think this was a very important movie, very educational, and very good performances that felt true and not Oscar bait, if that makes any sense. Um, and overall, I think definitely the relationships that he builds with Joe, even the kids. I think it makes Ruben's character a lot more sympathetic, and it makes it a lot easier to root for the guy. Especially in scenes where Lou basically abandons him, and it's just so heartbreaking to watch that. And Riz Ahmed just does a great job of portraying someone that feels like they're losing everything, and there's no hope. So, yeah, overall, I would recommend seeing this at least once. So there you have it.
Matt, you did it again. Threw us a curveball and we swung and we missed. This, I
Wait,
don't.
Hey,
what
two
was
out
the
of
last
three.
swing? What was the last swing?
What? What?
What was the last one that I was a swing and a miss?
I know. I'm just. It was just a joke. Like there's a lot.
I think my last pick was Robin Hood Men in Tights. My last real pick. Anyway,
It was a It sounded like it was a slap, but it was a compliment.
I
Like
know, no, I gotcha, I gotcha.
we all
Some
had different opinions.
it wouldn't.
It was.
That's always good, and it would not be a good film schmucks if one of us didn't hate it. Let's be real.
The usual suspect right here. We should watch that one. But
I've actually never seen that, and I don't know a lot about it. So I
ooh,
know that there's twists and turns, but I don't know anything
yeah.
about the twists or turns. So I'm like, I
All
need
right,
to watch
Sterling's
this
next
before I
pick.
get it.
All right,
Sterling,
is that next
we're
pick,
yeah.
Sterling?
That's not the movie I had in mind, but we'll see.
I feel like
Oh, we'll talk
I
about it in a
feel
few
like
minutes.
me and Trey are like the DNC and the RNC, where we kind of like, here's the two guys that you get a vote for, and we kind of pick the movies for you, and then you pretend like we'll pretend it's your choice, and you're like, I guess this movie, and we're like, Austin Powers
Yeah.
2, baby. Anyway,
Uh,
I'm sorry. Go
you
ahead.
know, well, we can't wait to review that for you guys. We love you joining us. I mean, let's get the comments going. We always been saying this. Like, subscribe, comment. Let's have some dialogue. Nostalgia's real where you go. You came back and you disappeared just as fast. So we'll see you next week on
Woo! Got it.